Washington, the Inside Scoop. All the news the government does not want you to know. Here's your host, Congressional Attorney Mark Levine.
Hello, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. When we have budget deficits, many politicians think there are no consequences at all. After all, you promise Americans a lot of sweet tax cuts or war if they want it, or maybe high social spending. Whatever it is, Americans don't feel the pain. You spend more, you cut taxes, there's a huge deficit, and it's just a big number. Or is it? What that does, of course, when we have a large deficit, is it allows a number of foreign countries to buy our debt, to buy our companies, to buy us. And increasingly, companies are buying us. We have companies all over the world buying American corporations because our country's heavily in debt. How does that affect us? How should it affect us? What can we do about it? Well, to help me answer these very difficult questions, I've invited a fellow talk radio host, Samantha Clemens. She is the host of the Samantha Clemens Show in Boston on talk radio up there. And she also, though, works to counsel corporations on the effects of globalization. Samantha Clemens, welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Good to be here.
National group that is charged with
corporations. I want to talk about sort of why it's happening before we get to sort of how it's happening and what we can do about it. And one of the main reasons it's happening, at least according to former Vice President Al Gore, is because of our energy crisis. I want to play a little clip from Meet the Press. We have here what Gore was said in the Washington Globe. The Boston Globe. It says that Gore challenged Americans to switch all of the nation's electricity production, all of it, to wind, solar, and other carbon-free sources within 10 years.
He was talking about crises caused by dependence on fossil fuels. The reaction was pretty quick, and not all of it was favorable, even from those who are aligned with you in thinking that we have to do something about climate change. This is what Philip Sharp, president of Resources for the Future, a Washington think tank, had to say. At this point, I don't think there's anyone in the industry who thinks that goal, as a practical matter, could be met. This is not yet a plan for action. This is a super stretch goal. Your friends at MIT, the Energy Initiative group up there, and they have some radical ideas as well. They said, can we do it this quickly? It would be very, very tough. What you have outlined, in fact, is a goal that may not be achievable.
I think it is achievable, and I think it's important that we achieve it, Tom. There were also many other reactions from people who said this is the right goal because we need to reset the bar and change the debate. Our current course is completely unsustainable. We are being told by scientists around the world, particularly the international group that is charged with studying this and reporting to world leaders, that we may have less than 10 years in order to make dramatic changes, lest we lose the chance to avoid catastrophic results from the climate crisis. We're building up CO2 so rapidly that we're seeing the consequences scientists have long predicted. And the only way to take responsible action is to get at the heart of the problem, which is the burning of fossil fuels. And the quickest and easiest way to back out the coal, which is the worst of the problem, and oil, is to look at electricity generation. And
let me stop the clip right there. Al Gore goes on to say that these are tremendous costs to America, that because of our high oil costs, we have a tax, but it's not a tax going to the U.S. government, it's a tax going to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and all these oil-producing countries. How much are Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Russia, all?
Well, they're getting rich at everyone's expense because everyone needs oil right now. That's the main form of energy that the world is relying on. The issue is that because we're spending so much money on oil, and at the same time we're incurring debt because of budget deficits, et cetera, there's essentially, we're borrowing money, as Al Gore said, we're borrowing money from China in order to pay for in the exchange rate change. So the US dollar has weakened tremendously within the last couple of years, and that's why all of these companies, foreign companies, are buying US companies. It's because of our fuel and everything else, which has resulted, right now the exchange rate is very favorable to them.
Right, so in other words, as our country sort of falls apart, as we owe so much money to people, we're cheap, we're a good bargain.
We're a good bargain because of the exchange rate.
So why should Americans fear a weak dollar? I mean, we have a weak dollar, you can sell things at cheaper rates, that helps our exports. What specifically are they buying up, foreigners?
Well, they're buying real estate in New York, for example. That's something that's very interesting. The housing markets have been going down everywhere in the world, or excuse me, everywhere in the United States, and actually other places around the world.
These oil-producing countries, how much are they getting rich at our expense?
World as well. But in New York, the real estate market continues. Well, who's doing the buying? I actually was at a conference not too long ago where people who deal with mobility issues, people moving around both into and out of the U.S. Were attending. And I spoke with a real estate agent who said that the people who are buying real estate in New York right now are foreigners. The money's coming
from...
Who
are they? Saudi Arabians?
They're coming from Europe, they're coming from Asia, they're coming from anywhere that their currency is not tied to the U.S. dollar.
So, in other words, what is the result of all of this? I mean, where do we go? So, does it concern us? Should it concern us if a bunch of foreigners own our land, own our companies?
Well, like most things, I mean, when people who own when you work for an employer who's headquartered in another country, I think there's kind of an inherent insecurity, a feeling of insecurity about that. So, for example, we recently in the news, InBev, which is a Belgian-Brazilian beverage company, just was in the news because they're buying Anheuser-Busch.
Right.
Now, they
Budweiser seems like a very American brand.
And it certainly is.
And very different from Belgian beer.
Exactly.
But
although the original Budweiser is Czech.
I am told that, though there's a big trademark controversy, which I'm not going to start here.
That's right.
But Belgium controlling Budweiser, that just seems very strange for people, who crack open a Bud on their pickup truck to know that, oh, this is a Belgian product.
That's right. But and it's also interesting to think that it's Belgian and Brazilian. And the Brazilian thing, I think, shouldn't be understated because Belgium is still a fairly high wage country located in Europe. Brazil, salaries in Brazil are much lower than salaries in Belgium. So
that's where the workers will be. They're going to be in Brazil.
Example of this, and this is actually not an American company, but I think it's an interesting example, is Tata. It's a huge Indian conglomerate.
Tata?
T-A-T-A. Tata.
Tata. What is Tata?
It's a global conglomerate that you will hear about if you haven't heard about it already.
I haven't.
Americans will be hearing about it.
What is Tata?
Tata's one of the largest companies in the world.
What do they do?
It's a conglomerate. They do everything. They're like a GE, only it's Indian-based. And they just bought a company called...
So first they take our jobs over there at the call center.
The workers are, and that's what their expectations are. Another example.
And now they're going to own us.
They're doing very well. I
don't mean to be Ludovsian about this, but I mean, should we be frightened?
Well, there are going to be some people who are going to be negatively. Ultimately, I guess I think that trade is a good thing. I think trade is a good thing for everyone.
Beer workers? I mean, I think of up in Milwaukee. I don't know, Laverne and Shirley's old jobs. I mean, are we going to lose those bottling plants? Are they going to lose a lot of jobs up there in Wisconsin?
That I don't know about. What I believe that InBev wanted from Anheuser-Busch was the distribution channels. They want to sell their beer in America. America is actually a hard market for foreign companies to break into.
So
the best way for them to do it
here.
Exactly. And there was actually a recent article in the Wall Street Journal evaluating their beers, and they were a little skeptical about it.
I don't think Americans like Belgian beer. I don't like that dark, sweet stuff.
There are 500 kinds of beer in Belgium,
and
they each have their own glass.
I'm too provincial. What do you want from me? I'm used to American beer. What else are they buying?
Well, what I was talking about, Tata bought a company called Chorus, which is an Anglo-Dutch steel company. Now, that's not an American company, but I was talking with a person who works in human resources who's involved with, once again, moving people around the world for that company. And the problem there is Tata said, well, we're sending some Indians to your company headquarters, both in the UK and in the Netherlands, so they can learn about your business. We want you to send some of your engineers to our headquarters in Mumbai, India. And the problem is that they pay on a host package basis. So in other words, they give people the local salaries everywhere they go. So it's easy to get Indians to go to the UK and the Netherlands, or for example, the US.
Yeah, but no American is going to go to Mumbai and work on their salary.
And you can't get the Brits to go to India on local salaries. He was told, I can't do it. His bosses said, get it done. That was the response. So now he's worried about his job. If I can't produce 10 engineers to go to Mumbai, India...
he just pays them enough and they'll go. It's that simple.
But how does he do that? He works for these employers. That's the issue, is that you have different people who think about things in a different way who are now making decisions and making decisions about your job. And that's what's frightening for people.
Let me say what's even more frightening for me. You know, I obviously support American labor. I want wages to be high. It does concern me that the Indian corporation can definitely outbid, or the Brazilians will work for less. But even more than all of that, more than India and Brazil, certainly more than Belgium or the Netherlands or England, I'm more concerned about our enemies, about dictatorships like China, which for all the wonderfulness of the Olympics still is a pretty brutal dictatorship that cracks down on personal freedom. Venezuela may be worse. I think Saudi Arabia is worst of them all. I mean, now that the Taliban's gone, the treatment of women is worse in Saudi Arabia than any country on earth. They may be our ally, but some ally that is. And they're getting richer and richer based on our oil revenue. And unless we do something like Al Gore talks about, what does it mean when a country that is not just competing with us, but is downright hostile to us, starts owning American assets?
Well, I think some people would argue whether Saudi Arabia is hostile towards us as a country, however they treat women within the country
were Saudi Arabian. I mean, let's just say that they're a cagey friend.
Well, but that's not the government. And the people running the sovereign wealth funds from all of these countries. So you have sovereign wealth funds in all of the countries in the Middle East who are oil exporters. So, for example, ADIA, which is the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. And you have the Kuwait Investment Authority. You have the Singapore Investment Corporation.
No, it was UAE that wanted to take control of American ports.
Well, they wanted the business. See, and that's where the question is, do you think that they have malevolent intent or not?
What if some of them do? See, I'm not saying they all do, but all it takes is one person. I mean, Saudi Arabia, let's face it, right here in Fairfax, outside of Washington, D.C., we had a Saudi Arabian school that was teaching in its textbooks awful things about Americans, about Christians and Jews, saying, you know, inferior peoples, all this stuff. I realize there are ally, quote unquote, but with allies like that, I'm not sure I need enemies.
Well, and it is a difficult issue because the sovereign wealth funds are an extension of the governments, and that is different from how it works here in the United States, where you have investment companies or hedge funds that are pursuing their own self-interest rather than directly the interests of the U.S. government. Many times those interests are in alignment, but they're not necessarily identical.
Does their buying our assets give them power over us? Let's just be blunt. I mean, they own our debt. They now own our assets too. What power does that give people who I don't entirely trust over the United States of America?
Well, I think that it gives them the power to make financial decisions that affect people who are trying to get a job.
Fire a large number of Americans.
Exactly. They also make decisions about where the money is going to be invested. It's the same kind of power that American companies have been wielding all over the globe for years.
Would it be
years
different?
And years.
I mean, I don't trust the American CEOs either. Would it be different to have the Saudi Arabian CEO? Would they treat workers differently than the American CEO?
Well, it's interesting because GE Plastics, which is located in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is where I live, was recently sold to a company that goes by SABIC, which is the Saudi Basic Industries Group.
Well,
and all of the workers.
Before you finish that story, I want you to tell it after the break. We have to take a quick break, but I want to hear how it is that Saudi ownership changed, if at all, the workers of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Folks, if you have a question, you are welcome to join in. This is live, and we would love to hear from you. The toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. If you have a question on globalization, if you think, hey, I'm going a little too far, let me know what you think. You can also comment on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. We'll be right back after this.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey, Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know.
Here again, the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I am your host, Mark Levine. Does it matter when foreigners buy up American corporations, when they hold so much of our debt, when we go into so much debt that the dollar goes so far down, does that make foreigners richer and Americans poorer? Other things to discuss, of course. It's not just that. Obama is doing his foreign trip. We're going to talk about that this hour. Also, Al Gore's proposal that we get off the fossil fuels in 10 years. Is that even possible? To help address these questions, I've invited Samantha Clemens. She is a radio host from Boston. She is also a consultant on globalization. Samantha Clemens, welcome back. Now, before the break, you were telling us that when a Saudi company, or Saudi, I guess, is this owned by the royal government, or is this a Saudi business?
It is, I don't know.
You don't know?
That
okay.
I don't know.
So a Saudi entity of some sort buys out a good old American plant in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. What happens?
Well, first of all, I should say GE sold the unit to them.
Well,
so
right.
It's not like they just came in and did this horrible thing to people. An American company sold a unit to a Saudi company. Okay. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is that there's a lot of very normal stuff going on
right,
around
but I
here.
don't trust GE entirely either.
Well, if you don't trust anybody, then what difference does it make?
Because big corporations, I just don't necessarily trust that they're doing.
Right.
When we have things like golden parachutes, where we have things where you have CEOs of corporations who are rewarded, whether they make the company do well or the company does badly. I mean, Michael Eisner, Disney falls through the floor, and he still gets hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't trust that they're necessarily doing what's in the corporation's best interest or in the workers' best interest, just given the way we have it. But go ahead. What happened in Pittsfield, Massachusetts?
The last report that I heard, and it was secondhand, I didn't talk directly with employees there, but someone who's familiar with the situation said that the Saudi, SABIC had said, we're not going to change anything. I mean, why would we want to change it? We're buying something that's working. We're buying something that we want to keep. And in fact, that's what happened. They didn't come in. They didn't ban booze. They didn't change worker laws.
They didn't require women to wear the hijab.
That's right, exactly. And so, of course, there was a lot of concern on the part of employees, but in turn, it turns out that up to now, those concerns are not.
So perhaps these fears are overblown. Perhaps it's like Lou Dobbs and immigration. Maybe Americans are screaming and they really shouldn't. They should just recognize this is the way the world works.
I have to say there's a sense in the community of people that are dealing with global mobility and moving people around, that companies buying and selling units, that this is all very normal. It's a normal part of globalization, that some sectors do well, some sectors don't do so well, etc. There's another group of people that say that there is something different about the sovereign wealth funds, because they are extensions of the government. And especially when we're talking about countries that we may or may not have the closest relationship with,
England,
that there is, exactly, it's not England, and so there is a difference there. But on the other hand, you have the United Arab Emirates are simply trying to become the major player in the Middle East. That's what they want to be. They want to be the next Singapore. And if they are going to achieve that goal,
economic player in the Middle East, because at the same time we have a bit of a nuclear arms race. It's not just Iran that we're talking about.
Right.
Bush has been promising Saudi Arabia, somewhat quietly, there hasn't been a lot of press about this, he's going to help them with civilian nuclear uses, and that's going to happen. I mean, I've been reading now, it's Jordan and Libya even, who tried to do wartime nukes. I mean, they say it's for civilian. I know UAE is part of this. They want civilian nuclear power too, but I worry about it. It's not so hard to transfer civilian to a nuclear weapon. India, for example, did that. And these countries have oil coming out of their skin. Why do they need nuclear weapons? I mean, why do they need civilian energy, nuclear energy?
Well, it all comes down to leverage, right?
I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is.
So the money.
So I worry that UAE doesn't want just economic leverage, of which I guess I'm willing to give them. I'm worried about something more sinister.
Well, and everyone is worried about that, and we all have to be watching about it. And of course, they have their concerns about us too. Is that we've been running around the Middle East, sending employees over there. We've been investing
countries
heavily
that didn't attack us.
And so the question is, who needs to be concerned about what? And I think everyone needs to be concerned about anyone who has too much leverage over you, is my view.
And I think what Al Gore was saying is that these developing nations are getting increasing leverage because of our debt, because of the price of oil. Let me play a little bit more from his Meet the Press interview.
It would cost a lot more money, and that would have a devastating effect on Main Street and especially on rural America.
Well, I don't agree with that, and I think that the devastating effect on Main Street and the rest of the country is coming from the present rising costs for electricity. And the reason why is China and the other emerging economies, again, are bidding up the price of every lump of coal and every drop of oil. And the new discoveries have been declining, so the estimates are now that these price increases are likely to continue until we stop just taking baby steps and offering gimmicks and instead have a strategic initiative. Tom, among other things, you are the...
Let me stop it right there. So do you agree with Al Gore that this is, I mean, the run-up in fuel prices from $3 to $4 to pushing $5 a gallon, this is just the beginning. I mean, 6, 7, 8, let's go to 10. China and India, they've got demand, and unless we get some other paradigm for electricity, we're in big trouble.
I think that the simple fact that the economies in India and China are the two big players, in the long run, are going to play a role, of course. The demand is going to go up, prices are going to go up. I think that's a given. However, I've seen other reports that the increase in prices is not matched by the increases in demand right now, and so there
That's the speculation.
Exactly. So I think there are a lot of things.
But the speculators are speculating because they think that even if it's not now, maybe 2-3 years from now, India and China will build up the
That's
price.
right, but there are some people who think it's a bubble. That literally, it's people who are trying to figure out where to put their money, and so now that's the focus of their speculation. So I think of the things that I have seen, prices will go up, but they're probably higher than they need to in the short run. But long term, yeah, of course, if China and India continue to develop, there is increased demand, and there's no reason to think that they aren't going to continue to develop.
At the end of the day, do you agree that we're in an oil shock, much like we had in 1973 and 1979? The oil prices are going up, and unless we do something like Al Gore is talking about, use electricity to fuel our cars. I mean, we already have electric cars that work pretty well for, you can go 100 miles or so. So what they could do, for example, is you could have these dual engines. Most of us, when we drive, are not driving 100 miles. Now, yeah, we like to do our cars for road trips. For those, you use the gasoline. Yeah. But when you're driving around town, you're commuting to work, you plug it in, you're fine, you get home. And electricity can be made with sand, right? Solar panels, glass, wind, things we're never going to run out of. Isn't that, at the end of the day, the only solution to our economy? Totally apart from foreigners, totally apart from, all...
But you can't look at it totally apart from foreigners because the globe is interconnected. It simply is. The financial markets are interconnected. I mean, the clothes that you have on right now, how much of everything that you have on and everybody else here in the studio, how much of it is made in the United States? Most of it is not. Most of the food we buy is from other places. And most of the
things. We're the breadbasket of the world.
We buy fruit from South America. We buy canned.
At least our wheat is from Kansas.
A lot of the packaged goods you buy that have the Kraft name on it are made in other parts in the world, and they're shipped back to the United States.
But the problem with globalization, as I see it, is not free trade. I mean, I'm an economics major. I got a degree at Harvard. I know that free trade makes everyone, the pie bigger, everyone richer. The problem to me is that when you're competing with workers who will work in Thailand on Nikes at 5 cents an hour, children.
Wages have really gone up in Thailand. Nobody in Thailand is earning those very, very low rates anymore. And that's the other parts of this whole thing that's very interesting.
So the whole world is getting richer. What about India and Mexico? I can name other countries.
From my perspective, wages are converging. The high wage countries, the wages are actually declining, and the low wage countries, wages are going up.
Well, wages are declining in America for those that are working in factories, but for CEOs, they're skyrocketing.
Well, there's this cadre of people at the very tippy top everywhere in the world they're not Americans, they're global players, and all of those people are doing very well right now.
And in fact, in America, as you say, we have regular declining wages, but the wealthy, those at the tip top of the cadre. Yeah. I mean, why is it? Here's a question I asked last week. I didn't get a good answer to. I'm going to ask you the question. See if you know the answer. In Japan, the CEOs of Japanese corporations make from 10 to 40 times what their workers make. In America, the CEOs of our corporations make 100 to 400 times what our workers make. Japan is often seen as a very efficient economy. Those people work very hard. They make pretty high quality products. Why are Japanese CEOs paid a tenth of what American CEOs are paid?
Well, it could be that Japan just went through many, many years of a recession. They had declining prices. They had a very difficult economic environment for many years. It could also, and this is speculation, I mean, ultimately you look at, well, what is the result? And then you try to speculate, well, why is the result? It could be that socially in Japan, it's just not accepted for that much differentiation. But there are good and bad sides to that, because if you have to be like everyone else, then you don't have the same innovation and creativity. And I don't think there are that many people that would say the Japanese are more creative than Americans.
See,
America has always been the place that you go for that.
If you earn $20 million a year, and if you earn $200 million a year, is it really going to make a difference?
Well, I mean, how do you know if you're the top dog?
I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. I think you could actually live on it. Maybe even afford a nice living.
Absolutely.
I mean, 20 and 200 million, to me the difference is a zero. I mean, how many yachts can you own?
Well, it's funny. I have a very good friend who I actually went to graduate school with, who spent his career in executive compensation. And so his job was setting the salaries for, and he worked in the he worked in the high tech industry. And I asked him once, years ago, what do you think motivates people? Do you think it's money or do you think it's other things? And he said, after you get beyond a certain point, it's not money.
Of course.
So the money is a marker.
Once you have your family is fed and they have all the needs they need in life, you don't need any more. I mean, it's...
Exactly.
But folks, if you disagree, let me know. Let me hear it. I want to hear from you. Toll-free number, 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. When we come back, we're going to talk about Barack Obama, the New Yorker cartoon about him, and his trip abroad. You can also comment on the web at radioinsidescoop.com. Back after this.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/meth.
Here again, the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. My guest is Samantha Clemens. I'm your host, Mark Levine. My guest is Samantha Clemens. She is a Boston talk radio host, the host of the Samantha Clemens Show, an expert in globalization. But we can talk about other things too. It's interesting to me watching good old Al Gore again, and it made me kind of nostalgic. I went back, maybe we can show this. I went back to my website to find out when I had endorsed Al Gore and Barack Obama as a ticket. And in fact, if we can show this, I have endorsed Gore and Obama June 20th, 2007. So there it is, Gore, Obama in 2008. I wanted Gore to be president and Obama to be vice president. And my man won't run. Now on Meet the Press, they're saying, okay, how about Obama Gore? And he's like, no, I can do more good outside the... Do you think he's right? Because I love Al Gore. I mean, I like Barack Obama a lot, but I would prefer Gore over Obama, Hillary. I liked him better than Bill Clinton. Okay, I'm just a real Gore fan.
I think he thinks he can do more not having the responsibilities of the office.
Is he right?
He can do different things. I think you can do a lot if you're the president, but I think you can push the envelope further if you're not.
He can't be president at this point, but he can be vice president.
Right.
I actually think if Al Gore were to let Obama people know that he wants to be vice president again, I think he'd have it.
I can't imagine why Al Gore would want to be vice president again. I'm sorry. I mean, the man's got to have some ego.
I think it's a pretty decent job. I'll take it.
I can't imagine. Why would he want to do that?
Go ahead, hire me. I'll take the job. Really, Obama. I'll do it. I'll take a lesser salary. Okay? You want to invite me, nominate me? I'm there. Oh, sorry, that was just between us.
Do you think that he would take it if they offered it to Hillary? If you don't take it, we'll give it to Hillary. That could be the option.
Oh, the threat.
Exactly.
That'd be a threat. Al, if you don't take it. Look, I don't know. I mean, it is a pretty bully pulpit. We've seen how Dick Cheney used it for evil. Why can't Al Gore use it for good? How much impact do you think Al Gore is having? I mean, he says that we need to be off of fossil fuels in 10 years, which to me reminds me of John F. Kennedy, not that I was around then, but reminds me of John F. Kennedy in 1960. We will send a man to the moon in 10 years. Lo and behold, 1969, we did it. Is Al Gore's goal achievable?
I do not know. I certainly don't have the expertise of saying whether he or not we can achieve his goal. Even if everybody got on board immediately tomorrow morning, we woke up and said we're going to carry out Al Gore's plan, I don't know whether it's going to be effective. I do know that there are many, many very strong players who are not interested in pursuing his plan.
Well, that's what we're talking with you about.
Difficult.
What is the resistance to his plan? Who are the resistors? I mean, the oil companies, okay, we got them. Who else resists Gore's plan? Is it people in industry? Is it CEOs?
I think there are a lot of people who are just skeptical about the implications, about the science. I think there are a lot of people who really, truly think that we need to know more. Good,
but they could say
thoughtful
that forever.
people.
I mean, the same people were skeptical of the internet. Sorry,
right,
but
that's right.
You know, it's the same idea.
Yeah. I think that the part of the mistake is that they didn't start talking about it as a security issue long enough, or soon enough. And I have to say, I met Nancy Pelosi at an event in New Hampshire in 2004, and I said, why don't the Democrats make the whole idea of energy consumption or conservation a security issue, wrap it in the flag, and it's going to be a great issue for Democrats.
Look who has oil. Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Russia. I mean, 3 dictatorships that we don't trust.
And Todd Friedman has been talking about this eloquently for many, many years, saying that, in fact, it's bad for those countries because the more money they have pouring into them, the more they are likely to be dictatorships. They don't have to answer to the people because they have so much money, and then they buy off the people with just a little bit of money. So he's drawn or connected the dots between lots and lots of money to those countries and worsening human rights conditions for the citizens of those countries.
I felt for a long time we've been arming both sides in the war on terror, that the insurgents are getting their money from us. Osama bin Laden is a perhaps recalcitrant, but a son of a rich Saudi billionaire who got his riches from Americans filling up their SUVs. I mean, where does Osama bin Laden get his money? Where do the Iraqi insurgents, where does Iran get its money?
Right.
From oil paid for by good old American consumers. I mean, when you fill up your SUV, you are a traitor. I mean, you're harming America.
That could have very easily been the frame if the politicians had gone out there with it.
But they don't want to attack ordinary Americans with their SUVs.
Because Americans are tied to their cars. I mean, look at we're in Boston. You know, we built the Big Dig. For those of you who don't know about it, a huge transportation project to make it easier to drive your cars. It seems to me that was a huge missed opportunity. That maybe not on September 12th, but maybe in the next year, we should have been spending our time and attention getting off of foreign oil.
So who is against the Gore plan? I mean, obviously, Saudi Arabia wouldn't like the Gore plan, but who in the United States, other than the oil companies and Dick Cheney, who are the people that are hiding in the background that are the opponents to something like what Al Gore's trying to do?
Well, I think ordinary people, when they make decisions about, well, how much am I ready to sacrifice in order to, if global warming really is as serious as what Al Gore says, then everything, you can't fly a plane. I flew a plane to come down here.
There's an economic argument, totally apart from global warming, and I support Gore on global warming.
Right.
But the economic argument of our country's getting weaker and weaker, they're owning more and more of us, we're in massive debt, all because we're spending trillions of dollars sending it to countries that I don't think most Americans fully trust, nor should we trust, rather than spending it on a Montana wind farm.
But that's not the only reason why we're in debt. I mean, we're in debt partly because of the war. We're in debt partly because Americans were encouraged to consume. That's what
don't forget the Bush tax cuts.
Exactly. Right. I mean that's what's driving our economy, is the fact that we buy stuff which is made by people, which employs people, and so on and so forth.
What I find interesting is I'm asking you, who are the institutional opponents of Al Gore, and you keep bringing it back to the people. I mean,
that's because we're in a debate. I ultimately do think that the country isn't completely on board there. They'll buy a curly Q light bulb.
So you blame the consumer, not you don't think it's some oil company because
you already said the oil companies were doing that, and they were definitely putting out misinformation about
the car companies? Why would they be opposed to it? I mean, if GM reforms itself, GM has been in the dumper for God knows. I would never buy stock in GM, for a very long time.
Yes.
Now, if some clever executive or scientist at GM comes up with the innovative dual electric gasoline engine, because we're going to need a transition engine, the perfect one that uses electricity up to 120 miles. You have a nice little thing, you can drive 20 miles more, warn the person, and then when you want to go visit your aunt in New York or whatever, then you can drive and pay for gasoline. But in the meantime, you save all this money. I think consumers would buy it. They'd like it even more than the Prius.
They will now, but they wouldn't when gas was cheap.
But they will now.
They will now.
Car manufacturers on board now?
Well, Honda's already doing it. Toyota's already doing it.
Okay, the Japanese are doing it.
But they make those cars here.
Right. But why are their execs more flexible than our execs?
That I don't know.
They're just not thinking outside the box.
I think so. I think that the American style of auto manufacturing was very much following the immediate short-term desires of American consumers, which is that they wanted the SUVs, they wanted the big cars.
I think if you build it, they will come. I think it's the opposite. I mean, they will say, yeah, we're just doing what the consumer wants to do. But I think if you build it, they will come. I remember back in the 1970s, Jimmy Carter did many things wrong, but the one thing he was right about was trying to get us into smaller cars. And in the 70s, worldwide, everyone started getting to smaller cars. And then came the 80s, and the Europeans continued to get smaller cars, and we built these big monstrosities. The word SUV didn't exist in 1979. We had station wagons. That was about it. We had tax benefits for SUVs. I mean, I think our country has, I don't blame the consumers maybe as much as you do. I think our country has encouraged consumers to go in the wrong direction.
I think consumers need to think long term. I think we need to start thinking more like our grandparents who were from the Depression era, who said we're not going to just throw stuff away and we're going to be careful about how we spend money. And I think we did end up with a throw it away culture. And I think that's what's gotten us to where we are. So it's not just these evil institutions somewhere else that are doing things. It's also us. We have to take responsibility for the situation that we're in. That's what I think.
Met the enemy and he is us.
And he is, well, we're weak.
Toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Feel free to comment on anything we're talking about. Let's move on to Barack Obama. Obama is making his first really significant foreign trip. Not that he hasn't been to Iraq and Afghanistan before. He was last there in 2006. McCain says he hasn't gone there enough. What do you think at this time when Americans are really concentrating on the economy, what do you think can be achieved by Obama's trip?
I think he just needs to get there. And I think it's good for him to go at a time when there's not much else going on, when the election cycle hasn't really kicked up in the fall. And so he's taking this opportunity to study up.
And mostly it's just to say, I've done it, I've been there, now let's come home and have an election.
Well, he's having conversations with important people. There's relationship building. I mean, meeting face to face with the, with the leaders of the countries that we're involved with, I think that's important.
To me, the most fascinating outcome of this was the words of Prime Minister Maliki of Iraq in a German newspaper, where he said, oh, I like Barack Obama's plan, the one to withdraw the troops in 16 months. He told Der Spiegel, I like Obama's plan, at which point the Bush administration was like, no, don't say that. And they went after him pretty hard.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, they even came out with a statement saying that that's not really what they meant. And then you go back and look at the actual translation of what Maliki said, and it was in fact the way Der Spiegel had interpreted it.
It was exactly correct.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So, but one of the fascinating things is that you have this debate in America,
where
both Obama and McCain are converging, actually, where Obama says, I want to get our troops out in 16 months, but if necessity's on the ground, make them stay a little longer, we'll work on that. And McCain says, I think they need to be there as long as they need to be there, but if we can pull some out, so they're both sort of converging into the middle. And the interesting thing to me is that in this debate, Iraq doesn't seem to have a vote. Americans are like, oh, well, Obama says get out now, and McCain says stay forever, and none of us seem to be concerned about Iraq. And so now you have the Prime Minister of Iraq saying, hello, we exist, it's our country you're occupying, we prefer the Obama plan. That's got to help him in the election.
It depends on how Americans view that. I mean, I just think that there are large sectors of the American population that don't like being told what to do by foreigners.
Even when foreigners are telling us, get out of our country.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Your listeners in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Boston, Massachusetts, I don't know. This is where you've lived most of your life. Is that right?
A good 20 years.
Okay. So, and I like the Red Sox. All right, I'm loyal, but Bostonians have I don't know, and I'm going to get in trouble for this from my Boston friends, but a bit of a chip on their shoulder, I'm going to say. I don't know whether it's too many Yankees-Red Sox battles or anything like that. They seem to very much want to prove themselves. Is that fair, or am I being completely unfair?
So you want me to just say that about this gross generalization about Bostonians? I think they're very confident. I think they love expressing their opinions. In fact, there's a radio website that people can put. It's a discussion website, and the Boston board has by many times more postings than any of the boards in any of the other cities.
Well, they're a very political city.
It's a political city. It's a city filled with people who love expressing their opinions. You also have a lot of people who come from other places who end up settling there, which is what I did. I wasn't born there, and the people who stay, I think, are of that ilk.
Well, let me say this. I do think it's actually a very friendly city, and far more friendly than many other cities I've lived in. When we come back, I want to talk about how Massachusetts, which started really on a limb, I guess, with the court decision allowing gay people to marry, and now just a week ago, I guess it was, maybe 2 weeks ago, Governor Deval Patrick said, oh, we're going to get rid of this old law that doesn't let others get married in Massachusetts. And it was a collective yawn, it seemed, in Boston and across the nation. People didn't seem to really care that much
Hardly
anymore.
hardly blipped. In my circles, anybody that I talked with, there was just, it seems like a foregone conclusion.
I want to know why that is. When we come back, is it just because Boston's a liberal city, or because Boston is Democrat school up there? So yeah. I have a decent feel, and I like Bostonian. But sometimes not as liberal as you would think.
Exactly so.
I want to get out and discuss that. If you want to join the discussion, please join us and be like the Bostonians. 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Back after this.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org. or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
Here again, the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. My guest today is Samantha Clemens. She is a Boston Talk Radio host. Here's your last chance to join in the discussion if you'd like. Maybe they're just enjoying it so much they don't want to interrupt us, which is fine too. But if you want to call in, the toll-free number is 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. You can also comment on the blog by writing it down at radioinsidescoop.com. Sam, I was going after your town a little bit here, but
exactly. I believe we left off with why are Bostonians so obnoxious?
Well, no. Look, they are obnoxious, but I like that. I find it a very friendly obnoxiousness, if there can be such. That's
it
Boston
is
to me.
It is. They
friendly
act tough.
and obnoxious.
They act tough, but they're really
act.
just gobs of goo inside.
I think Bostonians are very friendly people. Now, what's interesting about Boston, though, is it's seen as a very liberal city. I mean, Massachusetts is certainly the largest state in the United States where every single member of Congress in Massachusetts is a Democrat. Now, they use some little gerrymandering to do it, but still, I mean, you have 10 seats, I think, and they're all Democratic Congress people. What is it that makes Massachusetts so democratic, and are they as liberal as one might think?
No, they're not. As far as are they as liberal as you think, I was surprised when I actually moved to Massachusetts to find that there are there's small swaths of conservatism and quite conservatism. But I would say it's more of a class issue. The history of Boston is one of immigration and Irish Catholics Irish and Italian coming to Massachusetts, who were actually treated really poorly by the governing elite, the Boston Brahmins, who were English at the time. And
right.
You have to remember the history of the Irish is that they were exporting food at a time where they were being starved and getting on boats and coming to this country. So that history is really, really intense. Having said that, they are very conservative in some ways. I mean, the Pilot, which was the Catholic newspaper at the time, was actually against or supported the Confederacy at the time of the Civil War. The way they talk about it is that they wanted to support the Constitution. And the Constitution allowed for slavery, and so they were in support of that. Yeah, so that was the history. That's the history that they're coming out of, and so there is some residual conservatism.
Well, it's interesting to me, and I understand this sort of looking out for the underdogs, that the Irish and the Italians were the new immigrants, so they look out for underdogs. And yet, I have to say, what surprised me when I lived in Boston, and this is some time ago, this was when I was in college, but I'm just going to say it was racism. I grew up in the South. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I, of course, will not deny racism exists in the South. I'd be a fool to think otherwise. But it was very different, racism in the North and in the South. And I remembered an old adage that some may find offensive, but I think there's some truth in it, that in the South, people didn't mind so much if black and white people got close to each other, as long as there was a clear sort of hierarchy. They didn't want blacks to get too uppity, too high in the South. And in the North, the Northerners didn't mind if blacks got to be doctors and lawyers and powerful, but they didn't want to be too close. And it interests me that a lot of the busing debates and so forth were in Boston, of all places, a place that you would think would be very liberal and very open to desegregation. Do you think there's a racist problem in Boston?
I think that it's changed a lot since you lived
Since I
there.
lived there. All right.
I think
Fair
there
enough.
are still definitely residual issues. I think there's a huge generational difference. I've been talking with some young black coworkers and people that I know in the community about Obama and about how his being biracial, how they view that. And the thing that I get back from these individuals is that my father really has issues and sees racism around him, and I see it differently.
Well, that's not just a Boston issue. Obviously, that's a national issue. All you have to do is look at the polls for Obama, and people under 30 are screaming for him, and people over 60 are definitely avoiding him. How much do you think the New Yorker magazine cover feeds into this, is a symptom of this? Is it a cause of problems, or is it?
I think the people who read the New Yorker are going to get the joke. That's what I think.
But what's interesting is that the cover is shown to so many other people. If the media hadn't made such a big fuss over the New Yorker cover, then the people who don't read the New Yorker wouldn't even know about it. But now, I guarantee you, every anti-Obama group in the country will be spreading that around as if it's real.
I have a hard time. I think people are more sophisticated than that. I really do.
Depends which people.
But the people that you're concerned about, I actually think that they're going to get the joke. I think that cover is not going to affect somebody who already thinks, first of all, that Obama is Muslim, and second of all, that that's a problem.
Well, but there are a lot of people who do think that. There's a surprisingly high number. I mean, they did polls in West Virginia and Kentucky where you had 18-19% of the people say he's Muslim. I mean, that's astonishing.
That's right. But those people were not going to vote for Obama anyway. So I guess, to me,
it depends. Some of them you're right about. Some of them are poor white working class people who might vote for Democrats in another year.
Yeah. My feeling actually was that I thought it was pretty entertaining.
You thought it was funny.
And I thought it was funny. Because to me it was just so over the top. And to a certain degree, one of the things I would like Democrats to do is
have a sense of humor. It's not.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was making fun of the very people that you're concerned about taking it seriously.
It was. What I'd like to see the next step is the fist bump, the terrorist fist jab.
How absurd was that? How terrorist fist jab?
Well,
it's just a ridiculous thing.
Not that I watch too much popular culture, but Howie Mandel on Deal or No Deal does the fist bump and has for just once. I think Saturday Night Live or someone or Jon Stewart they need to put like a dashiki on Howie Mandel, because apparently Deal or No Deal is part of
that's part of the thing. Well, I had a guest on the show. He actually runs the State House News Service in Massachusetts, which keeps track of all the state news in the state. And he's now opening a bureau in Florida, and he comes into the studio and he does this, and I didn't know that. Oh, it's a terrorist fist jab.
You should tell him. You should be like, don't terrorist fist jab me.
I thought I was being really cool doing it.
it's a young person's thing, obviously, rather than
and I am not that, obviously.
People at the New Yorker. But I'm curious, does it lessen in any way? I mean, Obama, I think, has been struggling to show experience, struggling to show gravitas. Yeah. Struggling in a way that I think any younger person running for president would do. John F. Kennedy faced the exact same thing.
You don't get it automatically.
You're new. We don't know you. So does this kind of cartoon take away from that, or you think it's basically harmless and we need to get over it?
I actually thought that it was really good satire. I thought that it was making fun of people who see them in that light. I would like to see more of that, but I would like to see what the New Yorker does about John McCain.
Well, that's true.
The next one. That's the one I want to see.
It's only fair.
Exactly.
They need to put him in a dress.
So what are they going to do?
Right? They need to do something like that. Yeah. No, I think if the cartoon not been on the cover, but had been inside the New Yorker,
it's a great cover.
Nobody would have noticed it.
Yeah, I think we got to get a sense of humor.
So Obama is in the Middle East. He's traveling with Chuck Hagel, Republican of Nebraska, the only Republican who consistently votes to withdraw the troops from Iraq. Now, a lot of people don't realize Chuck Hagel has always had this history. This isn't like Chuck Hagel being brand new. He's always been a bit of an isolationist. He's always been against U.S. intervention, whereas most of the Republican Party is against U.S. intervention when a Democratic president is doing it, and for it when a Republican president is doing it.
You know what's the difference? He served. He knows what it's like.
So he knows what it's like. Because I remember Newt Gingrich was so opposed to Clinton's intervention in Bosnia, where, I mean, there was genocide going on. I mean, clearly in Kosovo particularly, there was a greater reason to go in than Iraq. And you had all the Republicans say, even when Bill Clinton, I remember bombing Afghanistan and Sudan, and they said, oh, he's trying to wag the dog. He's trying to get off the attention of what really matters, Monica Lewinsky. Right. So Republicans were against intervention when Clinton did it, for it when Bush did it, but Hagel's been consistent.
Right. I also think that they make distinctions about what is the strategic interest.
Right.
And saving people from genocide is not considered a strategic interest on the part of the United States.
So do you think that Republicans in their heart know this is all about oil? Do they know it?
Yes, I do.
Do you think they know it consciously or subconsciously?
I think it varies with the person. I've had people say, I really think it's about democracy. I've had people say, and I believe, I take them at their word if that's what they believe. That was a few years ago. I think people now know it's about oil. The question is that a horrible thing? Are people who don't want it to be about oil? Exactly. Just say that's what this is about.
We need to conquer Iraq. Iraq has the second largest oil supplies in the world. They have very sweet oil. We need it for our oil companies. We're going to invade. That would have been honest, but he couldn't have gotten a vote in Congress.
That's right, but he also doesn't need it for the oil companies. He needs it for us because we still use oil.
But it's not working, Samantha.
Right, but
it's not. Our prices are going up.
But again, I come back to.
I mean, Paul Wolfowitz said this war would pay for itself. If we're going to waste $1 trillion and we're going to invade a country that never attacked us and we're going to lose 4,000 lives, shouldn't we at least get cheaper gas prices? Why isn't it working?
Well, you've got too many other things going on. You have China and India, you have speculation, you have a war that didn't go as planned, you had a government that didn't have an after the war plan.
I also think that frankly they know it's about oil, and so you have the insurgents constantly disrupting the oil supplies because they know that's the thing that we most want.
Right. Here's going to be the trick, though. The United States is a Saudi Arabia of coal. Coal is dirty.
Yes, it is.
So which are we going to choose? If we have to choose,
we don't. Neither.
That's what Al Gore says.
That is what Al Gore says.
And so
I
the
agree
question
with Al Gore. Is that the case? I have listeners in West Virginia.
But that's going to be the pressure. The pressure is going to be on whether or not we're going to exploit our coal resources.
But you know what Al Gore said, and he's absolutely right. There is no such thing as clean coal technology. It's just something put out by the oil companies. Coal is dirty. It is fossil fuels. It does increase it. And we have sun. We have wind. We have it in abundance. It seems to me that Al Gore is right. That just like taking man to the moon, we can indeed finally do a major push and get off of fossil fuels. It just requires the president to do that. A few seconds left. Will Obama be that kind of president?
I think he's going to play the middle.
You may be
That's why he needs Al Gore off on the side.
You may be right, but maybe if we take Score the Insight, we can get it. Who knows? That's the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out more information on Samantha Clemens at samanthaclemens.com, and also go to radioinsidescoop.com for more of the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine signing off.